This is an ongoing investigation into the Kandi Burruss and Todd Tucker divorce proceedings, and tonight we are turning our full attention to the prenuptial agreement that is now at the center of major legal controversy. New analysis, combined with documented interactions and official filings, raises serious questions about whether this prenup was executed properly and whether it can withstand judicial scrutiny. This report will break down what happened, why it matters, and the legal standards that shape how judges evaluate a prenuptial agreement. Everything presented here is based on the evidence, the professional rules that govern attorneys, and the timeline of events that were recorded both publicly and in court filings. Before continuing, welcome to the Messy Sweet Spot YouTube channel. This is the home for real analysis, real breakdowns, and in-depth reporting on the stories the rest of the internet is picking apart in fragments. If you are watching this right now, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who has been following these developments, and subscribe to this channel so you do not miss the next update. Your thoughts matter. Make sure to leave your comments throughout the broadcast so your voice becomes part of this larger discussion. Now let us continue the investigation. The primary issue surrounding this prenuptial agreement is not emotion. It is not public opinion. It is not the status of either party. The central issue is the law, specifically the Georgia Rules of Professional Conduct that regulate what attorneys are allowed to do and what they are forbidden from doing. The moment an attorney chooses to operate outside those professional boundaries, the validity of legal documents they supervise becomes vulnerable. According to the Georgia Rules of Professional Conduct, particularly Rule 4.2, attorneys are prohibited from communicating about the subject of a legal matter with a person who is known to be represented by another attorney. This rule is strictly enforced. It is not optional. It does not bend in moments of inconvenience. It is a foundational rule that aims to protect every person in a legal dispute from being influenced, guided, or pressured by an attorney who is not representing them. The rule is simple. If someone has a lawyer, the opposing lawyer cannot speak to them about the legal matter unless their lawyer gives explicit consent, and consent must be clear, documented, and deliberate. This rule is central to the controversy surrounding the Kandi and Todd prenup. In the publicly available footage from the wedding special, Kandi's attorney sits alone with Todd in a hotel room. During that interaction, the attorney discusses the terms of the prenup with him, asks him to confirm to a notary that he is signing voluntarily, and provides commentary that can be interpreted as legal guidance. At no point in that footage do we see Todd's attorney present. At no point do we see evidence of consent from Todd's attorney allowing the opposing lawyer to communicate with him about the prenup. This is where the concerns begin. It is a documented fact that Todd was represented at that time by attorney Randy Kessler. He had not fired his attorney. He had not waived representation. He had not become what is known as a pro se litigant, which refers to someone who represents themselves. In fact, the footage shows Todd attempting to contact his attorney during the meeting. The call was not answered, but that does not diminish the central issue. Simply being unable to reach an attorney in the moment does not mean the person is legally without representation. This distinction is critical. The legal definition of representation is not determined by whether the attorney picks up the phone. It is determined by whether that attorney has been officially dismissed. In this case, there is no evidence of dismissal. Therefore, Todd remained represented. This means that Kandi's attorney was obligated to avoid direct communication with him regarding the prenuptial agreement. The professional standard required her to refrain from explaining the agreement, refraining from advising him in any capacity, and refraining from supervising him signing the agreement unless his attorney had provided explicit permission or unless a court order allowed it. Legal experts reviewing this case have pointed out that the attorney's behavior in that room represents a potential violation of Rule 4.2. When an attorney interacts with a represented person in this manner, it opens the door for the affected party to challenge the validity of any document signed under those circumstances. This is not speculation. This is established legal precedent. The counterclaim filed by Todd's attorney, Randy Kessler, provides further clarity. In the official filing, Kessler writes that the prenuptial agreement was presented to the husband on the day of the wedding without his counsel being present, despite the fact that the wife's attorney had previously communicated with him as Todd's attorney. That sentence carries enormous weight. It establishes that the opposing attorney knew Todd was represented. It establishes that she knew who his attorney was. It establishes that the signing did not involve his attorney. And it establishes that no permission was given for her to step into a role of explaining or supervising the execution of the legal agreement. This is the kind of procedural irregularity that judges take extremely seriously. Further footage from the wedding special shows an additional moment that strengthens the argument that the prenuptial agreement may be invalid. When Todd calls his attorney and asks if he can speak directly with Kandi, Randy Kessler states clearly that he cannot communicate with her because she is represented by counsel. That statement illustrates the very rule that is now at the center of this debate. Attorneys cannot speak to the opposing party when that party has representation. The rule applies in both directions. If Kandi's attorney cannot speak to Todd's attorney's client without consent, then Todd's attorney cannot speak to Kandi without the consent of her lawyer. That is precisely why Rule 4.2 exists, to ensure fairness, to ensure boundaries, to ensure that both sides operate within the same ethical structure. Given this context, legal analysts believe the judge may have strong grounds to invalidate the prenuptial agreement. The reason is straightforward. If a document is executed under circumstances that violate ethical rules governing attorney conduct, the integrity of that document becomes compromised. Judges often rule that such agreements cannot be enforced because they were not created in a manner that respects the professional standards required by law. If the prenup is thrown out, the divorce will shift into a standard Georgia equitable division process. This means the court will divide all assets accumulated during the marriage in a way that is just and right under the circumstances. A just and right division does not necessarily mean equal, but it does mean fair. It means the judge will consider contributions, earnings, responsibilities, and circumstances from both parties to reach a conclusion that reflects fairness under the law. This development would dramatically reshape the financial consequences of this divorce. Without the prenuptial agreement guiding the process, the court will look at the actual marital history rather than the terms negotiated before marriage. Marriage is not simply a romantic union. Marriage is a legal contract. It is a merger of lives, responsibilities, assets, and futures. When two people sign a marriage license, they enter into the most binding legal arrangement available between two individuals. And when that union ends, the dissolution is governed by law, not preference and not public opinion. The rules that govern legal professionals exist to protect the integrity of the legal process. When those rules are not followed, the consequences are significant. In this case, the potential violation is not technical, minor, or trivial. It reaches the core of how the agreement was executed. The prenuptial agreement was not signed privately between two individuals. It was signed under the supervision of an attorney who had obligations to follow ethical standards. The presence or absence of Todd's own attorney is not an emotional debate. It is a legal fact that his lawyer was not present during the signing. And that absence is the central issue. This investigation will continue, and additional filings or public statements may offer new clarity on how this situation will unfold. But as it stands today, the prenuptial agreement faces significant legal vulnerability. Based on the evidence, the attorney interactions, the court filings, and the ethical standards required by the Georgia Bar, there is a credible argument that the prenuptial agreement may not survive a legal challenge. This remains a developing story. Updates will follow as more information becomes available.